Welcome back to Gold and Black Live, segment 2, and that will be, we're going to use all the great technology in the world to find Brian Neubert on the phone. He is on the line, and we'll get to him in a minute. Also, Clayton Duffy and Ross Bolin, who have both watched Danny Anthrop play a lot, and both will be watching him play tonight and broadcasting in their own varieties. And we'll tell you how everybody can watch Danny Anthrop tonight at jpvideopro.com, which will be doing a live webcast of the game. So that'll be segment 3. Just a real quick with our thank you to our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn and our good friend Christy Kuntz, Follett's, and State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and West Point Steakhouse. If you get bored during this, click on the ads while we go and fire your questions. We've had a lot of questions today. And Brian Neubert, are you there?
I'm here, and it's an honor to lead off this all-star cast you've assembled today.
I know it is almost beyond the pale, off the charts. You know, it's all of that at one time. Where are you? Are you still? Have you broken the grip of Cleveland yet?
We're somewhere between Cleveland and Youngstown, I think. So on our way through Akron, up through Western Pennsylvania, and on to State College, I guess.
Yeah, it's already
there according to the GPS in exactly 3 hours and 24 minutes.
Well, that will be good, and we'll try to help you not wrap it around a phone pole today. But you know, this is nothing easy about going to Happy Valley, not only from a travel standpoint, unless you're on the team plane, that makes it a little bit easier, but also nothing easy really for Purdue tomorrow, one would think. We talked to Nate Bauer, and he had a lot of interesting things to say, but this is a big task for Purdue tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, and I've only seen Penn State play a little bit this season, not a whole lot, but you pretty much have to look at the numbers to know what you're dealing with here. I just don't know how Purdue's going to score, quite frankly. I mean, they've done some pretty good things offensively at times. They've been able to run the ball, done enough in the passing game to get to where they are right now, but I just, you know, it's just going to be an awful lot to ask for them to be able to move the ball tomorrow with any sort of consistency and put points on the board. You know, you're dealing with a defense here that's top 5 overall in the country and top 5 in a lot of other categories. I guess their weakness is stopping the run. They're only 17th nationally against the run, so I guess that's their weakness Purdue has to exploit. But Purdue has to be balanced tomorrow. They can't just run. They can't just throw. You know, they can't get the run taken away from them early, so where they have to throw the ball on every down. If they do that, they're probably just dead in the water. So from a physicality standpoint, you're going to deal with the same kind of front you dealt with at Notre Dame. This isn't a 3-4, it's a 4-3, but it's the same sort of talent, the same sort of bodies you're dealing with. And we saw what happened at Notre Dame in the second and third levels of the defense. Obviously, you're dealing with really, really talented players, really, really, really physical players. So, you know, we saw what happened a couple weeks ago when Purdue played Notre Dame, and this is a defense that's very comparable probably to Notre Dame in terms of the caliber of players they're throwing out there, but it's a little bit different, probably, quite frankly, a little bit better. So it's just, I just don't know how Purdue's going to score, and that's obviously pretty important.
Nate mentioned, you know, the ability for Purdue to get a big play is going to be important. It just doesn't seem like a Penn State defense that you can have a 10 to 12 play drive and move the ball down the field on. Can you kind of comment on that and what Purdue's going to have to do to move the ball and score if they can?
Yeah, well, they're going to have to do pretty much whatever they can. If you go back to the Notre Dame game, remember their base stuff wasn't working. They couldn't run the ball, and they weren't doing a whole lot with the pass. So what they ended up doing was trying to run a bunch of trick plays that were sort of out of context, so to speak, because trick plays, you know, work when you've got the defense back on their heels, when the stuff you try to do offensively as your bread and butter, when that stuff's working is when you can throw out the trick plays to make big plays. When you can't do anything, you know, trick plays just kind of come off as kind of desperate. And, you know, Purdue just, I don't know what Purdue has to do tomorrow, quite frankly. You know, it would help if they can run the ball, obviously, but I don't know if you can count on that tomorrow. I don't know how else you make big plays if you can't do the stuff Purdue is going to try to build its offense around. And if they can't, you know, I'm kind of talking in circles here, but if they can't do what they try to do as their basic stuff, I'm not sure how they're going to do any different stuff to try to make big plays. So I guess I can't answer your question.
One more football question, and we're going to get to some basketball recruiting. Rob, by the way, answers another one. And Rob, don't worry about your question about Mount Nittany. I probably didn't phrase it very well. But here, can Purdue, and this is a question from Rob, can Purdue manufacture more of a pass rush this week? And maybe dovetail that to the quarterback situation. I know you wrote about that in your column this week in GBI Express, but this is an interesting and different tale of two quarterbacks at each place, but an interesting situation nonetheless.
Yeah, well, as to the question of whether or not Purdue can get more pass rush this week, I don't really see any reason to believe they can. And if they do, the one advantage they might have is the fact that you're dealing with some inconsistent quarterbacks here who could make some mistakes. What you saw 2 weeks ago against Notre Dame is Purdue blitzed a lot, and it seemed like every time there for a pretty significant stretch of the game, Notre Dame did exactly what it had to do to beat that blitz. It either handed the ball off on a draw right at where the guy was blitzing from, or if Purdue blitzed off the corner, they just threw the ball right over the blitzer's head, right to the open receiver. I don't know if you can count on Penn State's quarterbacks to do that because they're not as experienced, they're not as good. But Purdue has to get some pass rush tomorrow. If they can stop the run well enough to make Penn State pass, there's just simply no way around it. They have to make the quarterbacks uncomfortable because the guys Penn State have will make mistakes, and that's probably Purdue's saving grace if they can do that. As for just being able to generate a pass rush without blitzing a whole lot, I just don't see how it's going to happen. I just don't know if Purdue has the guys to do it. Penn State always has a good offensive line. They're pretty big this year. They've got a lot of experience, and Purdue I just don't know if they have the guys. And this is, what we talked about in the offseason was, what we heard about the defense was it could improve because everybody's back and everybody's older. Well, that's all fine and good, but the one guy who's gone was pretty good, and he was your pass rush. And that was the strength of Purdue's defense last year. They led the Big Ten in sacks. They were one of the most disruptive teams in college football, really, in opponents' backfields. And that was all because of Ryan Kerrigan and because of the mismatches Ryan Kerrigan created for other people. And they just don't have that right now. And we pretty much knew they weren't going to have that, but they don't have anything close. They don't have guys who can seem like they can do anything on their own. And that's going to be a real issue moving forward for Purdue if they can't get it figured out.
All right, now on to A.J. Hammonds, and of course, just when you thought you might had a chance at a decent night's sleep last night, A.J. decides to make it official that he's committing to Purdue. Lots of question on A.J. Hammonds. First, maybe talk a little bit about his upside and how this saga ended up being Purdue in the end.
Well, in terms of his upside, it's pretty awesome, quite frankly, because he's just gigantic, and you don't find size like that every day. You don't find size like that every 5 to 10 years, quite frankly. Purdue has never had a guy this big who can play, and people are going to laugh when I say the name Matt Tendam, but he is that size, but he's got good feet, he's got good hands, he can run up and down the floor, he can actually play basketball, and I mean that with all due respect to Matt Tendam. The thing with Hammonds is he's a little bit of a low motor guy, always has been. He's taken some steps in a positive direction in that sense the last couple of years. When he was a freshman, he really had a long way to go from a conditioning standpoint, just from a taking basketball seriously standpoint, but through the course of time, he's gotten in much, much better shape. Seems like he takes the game a lot more seriously. I think he understands how far he can take it now, and I think he's, just as I said, he's starting to take it more seriously. But if he really gets it figured out, I mean, he could be a pro, no question, because he's 7 foot, 260 pounds or so. He can run, jump. He's got long arms, long legs. He just, as I think I said somewhere last night, I don't know if it was Twitter or what, but he doesn't just clog the lane, he pretty much is the lane. I mean, he occupies so much space, and he can get hands up to rebounds without jumping where guys at the peak of their jumps can't get to him. He just is an absolute force from a shot blocking standpoint and from a rebounding standpoint, just because he's got such an unbelievable advantage on guys because he's so much bigger. So that alone would make him, at the very least, a guy who can change games defensively, much more so than probably Juwan Johnson even could, because Juwan Johnson had the athleticism and the length, but he didn't have that awesome side that just kind of cast a shadow over everybody on the floor. So at the very least, he's a guy who's really going to make an impact at Purdue from a defensive standpoint.
Now we had one of our viewers ask, is Roy Hibbert a good comparison for Hammonds? What are your thoughts on that comparison?
That's actually not bad. I think Hibbert's bigger. I think he's taller from a vertical standpoint. From a skill standpoint, probably comparable. I don't think either of them are all that skilled. I don't think any of them are going to be, either of them are going to be shooting jumpers, anything like that anytime soon. I think that's one positive thing too about Hammonds is he hasn't tried to be anything he's not ever in his basketball career. So often nowadays you see centers who want to be small forwards because that's kind of what's cool nowadays, and that's what kids think will get them to the NBA, is that if you're 6'10", you should play like you're 6'7". If you're 7'2", you should play like you're 6'10", that kind of thing. I don't think I've ever seen him do that. He has a pretty good back-to-the-basket game offensively, for his age at least. You don't see guys who can do some of the stuff he can do with his back-to-the-basket. Pretty well refined, kind of like Travis Carroll was, though not as fine-tuned with his post-offensive game. But you just don't see him trying to do anything he shouldn't be doing. He doesn't try to shoot jumpers. He doesn't try to shoot threes. He doesn't try to put the ball on the floor. He just throws himself down in the post, uses his body to get position, get the ball, and then he just uses that size to his advantage. So I guess back to your original question of whether he compares to Roy Hibbert, I'd say that's a pretty decent comparison, probably as good as I've heard.
Well, you mentioned the recruiting, aspect that we haven't had Purdue hasn't had a player like him in a long time. What does it mean to add him to an already pretty well acclaimed 12 class when the focus has kind of been on Gary Harris of late, to add a piece like this who can play a position that Purdue hasn't really had in years past?
Yeah, it's certainly good from a class balance standpoint. Now you have a power forward, you got a center, you got a wing, you got a point guard with the potential to add a true shooting guard. So you could have the proverbial full starting lineup in this recruiting class of all guys who are pretty highly regarded guys. So it could be a really good class that way. When you look at Purdue's roster moving forward, Travis Carroll's going to be a sophomore this year. He'll be a senior in 2 years. Sonny Marchouche is in the same class. You don't really have a five-man moving forward. So when you kind of look at what Purdue's still been trying to recruit here with its 2012 class, he's actually, or I shouldn't say he, I probably shouldn't personalize it, but when you look at the role he'll play, the position he'll play, he's probably more of a pressing need than anything Gary Harris would be, though obviously Gary Harris is the better player, and you fit Gary Harris in wherever you can get Gary Harris. But truth be told, really, somebody to play the five position was probably a little bit of a bigger need moving forward.
Well, I was going to say, last question for you before we turn you loose. And yes, there's the obligatory Gary Harris question, and really not a whole lot more to say on this. But turning on to another hot topic, Rob Hummel and his recovery. I know you've been working on an extensive feature for our print magazine upcoming, but can he ever be 100% like he was as a freshman and sophomore, even before the back injury? Or what's your view on that? I know that you're not a medical person by trade.
Yeah, I don't want to say he can't be because I don't know that, but you obviously have to have a little skepticism about it. I think he can still be a very, very good to great player. If he can be as good as he would have been if he'd never gotten hurt, I don't know if we can answer that question because we don't know how good he could have been if he'd never gotten hurt. But from everything I'm told, he is 100%. I think Purdue. I think Purdue will be happy to take him as he is because he's still very, very good to great. We just don't know how good he could have been had he never gotten hurt. That's just kind of a fact of life, and there isn't any going back now.
All right. Well, have a safe rest of the drive. If Stacy's driving now, I'll tell her thank you. If she's sitting there patiently putting up with you, tell her thank you again. And have a good trip. Hope you get there in good stead. And we'll make all the obligatory phone calls to the necessary airlines here after the show's over to try to work some deals. But I appreciate your patience with the travel, and that's how it works sometimes.
Sure.
Thanks again, and
When
Brian.
you call the airline, just be sure to keep it clean, all right?
Yeah, I will. I'll do my best.
All right.
All right. Now we'll take a couple-minute break. Then we'll have Ross Bolin and Clayton Duffy join us. We'll be talking all things Danny Anthrop and maybe a little West Lafayette CC game, and also obviously Purdue and Penn State. We'll look forward to doing that in our final segment of Gold and Black Live.
Just one night. One team victorious. The story behind the score. The rivalries. The big plays. From the sidelines to you. On the air, online. Are you ready for the frenzy? Friday Night Frenzy. High school football from where you live.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts, League and Champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's, Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
West Point Steakhouse is a family-owned restaurant known for premium quality steaks. Open for dinner Thursday through Saturday. Stop by for the Thursday night prime rib special or Friday and Saturday night specials like pasta and seafood. Be sure to come and enjoy all the food and fun at West Point Steakhouse.
You can now get a quote or buy car insurance 24 hours a day. Call me, State Farm Agent Trent Johnson, at 743-9595 and see how much money you can save today.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
When you see it happen, report it. Send us your news stories, photos, and videos with our Report It feature. It's easy with WLFI.com and the WLFI smartphone app. With a few simple clicks, you can send videos and photos of breaking news coverage. See your submissions on air as part of our broadcast or online in the Report It gallery. WLFI.com. Always mobile, always connected.
Everybody straighten up. They did nicely. Clayton Duffy to my right. We actually have graphics here, which is really cool. So
Oh,
you guys
fantastic.
know
There we go.
where everybody is.
Glad I'm in the right chair.
I know. Clayton is it's all how I send the email early in the morning. But really, Kim, they do a great job back there of being very flexible, mainly because I got here at 1:57 for a 2 o'clock show today. So
That's early for you.
yeah, Ross Bolin also from Sports Team 18 and all things. You know, this West Side CC game really is big of an event in this community. I don't want to speak poorly about Purdue, Minnesota, but there's probably more. I mean, last week's game. I'm just talking about comparative interest. There's a lot of interest in this game in this community tonight.
Oh, there's been buzz ever since the schedule came out, whenever that was back in the spring, early part of the summer. This game's been circled on both teams' calendars since then. So I think it's just been a matter of both teams trying to take it day by day.
Absolutely.
And try not to get ahead of themselves. And really, kudos to both teams to finally get here and both be 8-0 and neither one of them stubbing their toe along the way.
And Ross, you've watched Danny Anthrop and CC, and you've seen West Side play. What do you expect from tonight's game?
You know, I don't think that you're going to you're not going to stop Danny Anthrop. You're just not. West Lafayette has a great defense, probably the best defense in the area, and Marshall Overly even earlier this week said it's the best defense he's ever had at West Lafayette, and he's a defensive guru, and when he's talking about that, and he's had some good players, when he's saying that's the best defense he's ever had, I still don't think you're going to stop Danny Anthrop. It's about containing him and slowing him down enough to give you a chance.
Yeah. Sean Bush, Westside's quarterback. And Westside's got some talent and some speed. I mean, there's no doubt that Amangali and some others can run and may have to be forced to run with Danny Anthrop. But how do you look at this one shaking out? Anything that we're not, everybody's talking about Danny Anthrop and what he does, but anything that we're not looking at that you might expect to rear its head tonight?
I think the cool thing about looking at the matchup was every time you look at one side of the ball and you go, okay, West Lafayette's got Sean Bush, and you go, oh, well, CC's got Austin Munn. You know,
yeah.
Well, CC's got Danny Anthrop. Oh, well, Westside's got Golly and Woodard, and it seems like everybody has a piece.
Ben Thomas.
In every position in terms of all the skilled positions. So you always try to look for an edge here or there, and it seems like each team has that weapon on with each of those positions. That's what makes it, I think, cool tonight, just the fact that finally the great players from West Lafayette and the great players from CC are going to match up, and we'll see which team's the best.
A lot of debate, and yet since Danny had committed to Purdue 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I'll get both of your opinions, starting with Ross, about what he brings to the next level. I mean, obviously nobody's been able to slow him down at CC. There's always been the talk of level of competition, who he plays. Danny Hope, as we understand it, certainly was much more impressed with Danny Anthrop's senior film as opposed to junior film, hence the offer. What do you see as his biggest improvement from last year to this, and just how good and how does he fit in the college game?
Well, I think it starts with angles on the football field. Week in and week out, you see teams and they try to contain him and they try to get the angle on him when he gets out in the open, and you just can't catch him. He's gone. And I think Danny has done a good job of taking his speed to the next level. And I think track this past year, Coach Bourdonnais wasn't very happy that he didn't play baseball, but I think running track and making it to the state finals, I think, really helped him, and it improved his speed and his 40 time at camps. It was kind of like that that famous fish story where it gets bigger and bigger. It got to a 4.240 at one camp this summer. So I think speed is the real thing that Danny improved on this year.
Sure, hurting that wrist last fall might have been a blessing in disguise because he couldn't play basketball, couldn't play baseball. Well, we'll go out and run track because the legs were healthy, went out and got all the way to the state finals in terms of speed. I just look at him and he just jumps off the football field. He's at a different level in terms of speed. I mean, I've covered high school sports around here for over 20 years. We haven't had that many type kids come through this area that just jump off the field. They're just at a notch better than everybody else, and that's where he is.
We've had questions about fans that want to watch the game tonight, get their first look at Danny Anthrop. Tell us a little bit about want to watch it live. Clayton will be working with Brendan Murphy and broadcasting the game, or webcasting the game, but tell us how they can find it as well.
Well, I would say the first thing is if you ever get the chance here in the next few weeks, and I think Ross would agree with me, you got to get to the field.
You got to see him in person.
And see him in person because even as good as he looks on video, good as he looks in any other form, just seeing him live is just totally different than, I mean, our cameras don't do him justice. These guys' cameras don't do him justice.
Not.
He's just that fast and well-rounded. It's more than just him and they flip him the ball and he takes off. He can do a bunch of things, and he's great in terms of playing defense. I mean, his defense against Guerin Catholic was pretty much the difference in the second half.
And special teams.
And special teams. Is Westside going to punt the ball to him tonight? Rensselaer did that last week and got burned.
Yeah.
A lot of teams this year have punted the ball to him and gotten burned. I can't wait to see whether Marshall Overley is going to punt the football to him. Anyway, back to the original point. Yes, if you can't get to the field, you can catch it at jpvideopro.com. Just go onto your computer or your mobile device and click right on there, our little Friday Night Madness logo. Jump on there, and we'll have from the first play to the last play, we'll have all the coverage for you tonight.
And you guys will have guys on each sideline, and tell us a little bit about your coverage and what local fans can do. And you also have things on the site too.
Right, and we're going to attack it from all angles. We're hoping to go live at 5 and 6 tonight. Caleb Martin's going to be on the West Lafayette sideline. I'm going to be on the Central Catholic sideline. We're going to combine highlights at the end of the night. We're also going to get interviews from winners and losers, and we hope to have the winning coach and maybe the difference maker, whether that's Danny Anthrop or Sean Bush or Amon Galley or Ben Thomas, or the list goes on and on. We hope to have them in studio for tonight's Friday Night Frenzy.
Well, and Clayton being Clayton and I a little closer in age as opposed to Ross, just a youngster over there. But you've watched Vinny Sutherland play, and Ross, you may have seen him on film. that's the guy that he reminds me of. And again, I haven't seen him play enough, but just with that burst. But anybody else that you, from a Purdue standpoint, or anybody else that you see in football that Danny Anthrop reminds you of?
Sure, I think Vinny's one of those names that definitely jumps out there. I think it'll be interesting to see how Coach Hope and his staff attempt to use Danny Anthrop. I think he could play in a position like Taylor Stubblefield, and find those short little routes and find a way to use his speed and use the angles that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And get open that way. Or be a Tim Dwight type player in special teams and get him the football and do some things there. So I wouldn't pigeonhole the kid in terms of what he can do at the next level. If I was the coaching staff, I'd just experiment and see what he would do the best in terms of running the ball, catching the ball in the flat, special teams, different things like that. He's great in the defensive secondary as well. He's got 3 interceptions this year. He's returned a few for touchdowns. He can do a lot of things.
Yeah, Ross,
I think you just turn him loose in camp and see where he excels the most, because he's going to make a difference. He's going to be one of those kids that he's just got that winning mentality, and he makes winning plays a lot of the times. And granted, it is at 1A, but I think you just got to turn him loose and see where he can benefit the most for your team.
Well, I think the interesting thing is he runs the 10.6 or whatever he ran, I think, in the state 100-meter last year. And there's a guy that hadn't done it. He doesn't have, I know some track folks in the area that have talked about not blessed with great form, but just great ability in terms of running. I'm just talking running. I'm not talking football. That's the kind of guy he is. He comes from a great family. Papa John, so to speak, played basketball at Purdue, and his mom Jana has coached. And this is about as athletic a family. And of course, we all know Drew will be a junior, I believe it is, with Purdue's men's basketball team. This is a family that's the kids have always been involved, always been great kids. I mean, it's kind of everything is advertised to have a guy of that caliber come into a program like Purdue.
No doubt about that. And I think another thing too is, as Ross was kind of touching on, he does a great job in the field of working his angles, being patient, taking advantage of his teammates. I don't know if I've seen anybody all this year get a real true hit on the kid. He does a great job of being elusive out there, starting and stopping, making some moves. And as you mentioned, once he turns the corner, at least to this point, of the times that I've seen, once he turns the corner, see you later.
Yeah, I'd like to see, like I said, I will be fascinated to watch what Westside tries to do from a spy standpoint. And they change their personnel on defense a little bit to try to deal with him. It'll be fascinating to watch from that standpoint. Let's turn to Purdue-Penn State, that other game that we're kind of hitting on.
There's another game this weekend?
And Clayton, obviously, and Ross are very much involved with Purdue coverage, and Clayton also with a pregame show. Tomorrow you will have JP Video Pro.
Right.
And that starts at
10 a.m.
10 to noon.
We'll be live over at Boiler Market, or you can see us online. We're always on 2 hours before every game, so we'll be on there tomorrow.
Big challenge for the Boilermakers tomorrow in a place that Purdue has not. No one's done a lot of great things at Happy Valley, but Purdue has struggled for the most part there. What do you see in tomorrow's game?
Well, 2 things jumped out at me when I heard Coach Hope talk on Tuesday of the media. And of course, we're always over there and listening to him. A couple things that jumped out to me was when I asked him if he felt his team was battle tested in terms of going into Penn State and 100,000 fans there, as opposed to they went to Rice and there was 25 plus there or whatever. So the environment will be much different. And he mentioned the fact that the environment and all the hype surrounding the Notre Dame game and all the buzz there was with that game. I'm thinking, yeah, there was a lot of buzz with that game, but your team didn't handle it very well.
Yeah.
It wasn't a stellar performance that day. So okay, then how do you handle the environment going into Penn State on Saturday? And the other thing I thought was interesting was that there was a lot of talk about how well Purdue is taking care of the football this year as opposed to last year or the year before. A lot of talk about that. Do you get a little superstitious at all when the head coach and players are talking about how well you've held on to the football? Could that be an issue tomorrow against a real stingy Penn State defense?
Well, and I think turnovers are going to be huge in this game because you don't want to wake up that crowd. That's for sure.
Right.
And I think the key for Purdue tomorrow is to give Ralph Bolden and Akeem Shavers plenty of work and maybe try to wear down that crowd and wear down that defense and try to keep the offense on the field and minimize those turnovers.
Right.
And you got to be in a position. That's, I think, going to be the real question is Purdue going to be in a position on first down to get, if they do try to run, can they manufacture enough real estate, so to speak, to be able to plot against Penn State. That's what's going to be interesting to me, I think, from a Purdue perspective. Ralph Bolden, the last 2 games, 2.8 yards per carry in each game, does not seem to get away from anybody. Yet doesn't mean he can't. Certainly against Middle Tennessee, had the 17 carries over 100 yards. What do you see from Ralph? And is it Bolden? Is it Shavers? Is it maybe Akeem Hunt? I mean, what do you think Purdue has to do from the run game to make it work?
Well, I was surprised at how many carries he had against Notre Dame here in the last few weeks. I know he tweaked his hamstring a little bit here recently, so hopefully he's getting back to full strength in terms of doing that. But I mean, Coach Hope just raved about how great Penn State's defense was on Tuesday, especially their front seven, front four. So I mean, if you're going to run these guys, you better figure out a way to get some openings in there, to get them some openings, to get some yards, and do some things, and try and work that clock a little bit. And then obviously, if you get it in a scoring opportunity, you need to take advantage of it. No doubt about that.
A question from Billy, I'll throw to Ross. Which quarterback will end up getting the majority of the snaps tomorrow? We'll all chime in on that, but between Marv and Turbush.
I think in a game on the road, you've got to go with Robert Marv, the experienced guy who's played in road games before. I think Marv gets more attempts under center.
Interesting. I'll go ahead.
I'll say we know one thing for certain is that Coach Hope implores the fact that they got to play both quarterbacks in the first half. He doesn't want it to be a tight game in the second half, and one of the kids is not getting in there. So, I think we'll see both of them at this point. And I mean, neither one of them's really jumping off the page for me, but we'll kind of see how things go tomorrow. It might be a case of ball security, handling the football, taking care of things, calming the kids down with all the crowd there and things like that. It might be the guy that's most cool and calm tomorrow. Could
it be the Stallion? Would be the guy that would do that? I don't know.
The Wild Stallion?
Yeah, Wild Stallion.
Is he still wild after last Saturday against Minnesota?
He did play within himself from that standpoint. But I do think, and I'd be surprised, and I'm usually dead wrong on these things. I see Purdue trying to be conservative, trying to do what be almost safe, which can be dangerous in that situation. Because Purdue's got to find a way, and even Nate Bauer talked about that in the first segment. He says the only thing that Penn State's defense is really vulnerable to is deep, big plays, and Purdue has had zero big plays. Certainly balls were over the top passes. We talk about it. I think it was Rob Henry to O.J. Ross is about the only over the top pass I've seen at Purdue in quite a while that's really worked. So. It'll be fascinating. I think I'll tell you a lot about what the direction of Purdue is, assuming that Marv is 100%, which we seem to think he is. It'll be fascinating to see how Danny Hope manages that tomorrow. I would bet more on Turbush tomorrow, but I'm seeing a game. Purdue's hoping for a game of a 9-6 type game, but when you say that, everything changes from that standpoint. Defensively, it seems to me that Purdue's got to find a way to get a pass rush tomorrow.
I mean, I watched some of the Iowa-Penn State game last Saturday.
Oh, my goodness. That was brutal.
That was awful football. I could barely even – because I wanted to let's just look ahead a little bit and see what's going on. That was awful football. I mean, that was just a game I couldn't even watch. So you don't go into this game all worried about Penn State offensively. I mean, I don't think they're going to hang 40 or 50 points tomorrow because they just were it was just a mess trying to get them to get the ball up and down the field. But you're right. I mean, that's been the thing throughout the season. Can Purdue get any pressure on a quarterback at all? Is McGloin or Bolden, are they going to sit back there all day tomorrow afternoon and throw the ball over the place? Probably not. They're probably going to try and run it and try and do their thing too. It's almost like the old Tampa Bay Bucks, kind of like leaning on your defense to win games.
Right.
Hey, offense, just don't go screw it up.
Yeah, and watching that game last week, the thing that was in the back of my mind was I hope Penn State doesn't wake up next Saturday when they play Purdue. And I think Purdue has to get a pass rush. They really do. They've got to put the pressure on Matt McGloin. I think McGloin's going to play in this game more than Bolden is.
Yeah, I got to believe that'll be the case. We're down to 45 seconds. Prediction time. So I know Kirk Herbstreit on ESPN never wants to give a prediction for a game. He does, but if you guys will indulge us, Westside CC, who do you see?
I lean in CC's advantage simply because of Danny Anthrop. If he runs nuts like he has been throughout the season, CC wins. If West Lafayette contains him, I think the Red Devils win.
I'm going to be the politician. I love both of these coaching staffs and both these players equally. I'm going to say the difference in this game tonight is which player that we're not necessarily talking about, Danny Anthrop, Sean Bush, Amon Galley, which other player is going to step up and make a play in this game that's going to swing things.
All right, Purdue-Penn State?
Got to go with the Boilers.
All right.
Penn State.
Penn State, and I'm saying Penn State 20-6. I'm a West Side guy. I still see CC in a 34-28 win, but I'll have to admit I hope I'm wrong. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us, and great insight on it'll be fascinating to watch. jpvideopro.com and also WLFI.com for all the Danny Anthrop coverage from tonight. thank you to Kim and to Patsy and Gordon and everybody else that's been associated with putting this broadcast web show on. West Point Steakhouse, also our good friends Hilton Garden Inn, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and Follett's Purdue Bookstores. Thank you also for your sponsorship. We'll be back next week. We'll have Kyle and Brian, hopefully they make it back, and Stacy back from Happy Valley. We'll have a show next Friday leading into homecoming. We'll see you next week on Golden Black Live, and enjoy this fall weather and all the football that'll be coming this weekend. Take care.